The morning my mother-in-law looked me in the eye and said, "This is just how our family works," I finally understood. I wasn't a daughter-in-law. I was staff. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just set down the dish towel I had been holding for the last 4 years and thought, so this is what it actually is. Let me tell you how I got there. My name is Clara. I'm 31 years old. I have a master's degree in landscape architecture, a firm I built from 2 clients and a folding table in my apartment. And until 14 months ago, I had a husband named Daniel whose family I genuinely loved, or thought I did. It took me a long time to understand the difference between being loved by people and being useful to them. Daniel and I met at a conference in Austin. He was warm, funny, the kind of person who remembered your coffee order after one conversation. His family was close-knit, loud at holidays, the sort that called each other every Sunday. I grew up in a quiet house with parents who worked different shifts and left notes on the refrigerator. His family felt like something I had always been reaching for. So when he asked me to move with him back to Charlotte, where his parents and his younger brother Marcus lived, I said yes without hesitating. That was the first yes in a long series of yeses I should have examined more carefully. We moved into a house 12 minutes from his parents. That detail seemed sweet at the time. Within 3 months, we were having Sunday dinner there every single week without exception. Within 6 months, I was the one cooking it. It happened gradually, the way most traps do. His mother, Diane, had a bad knee. Just this once, could I bring the sides? Of course I could. Then his father, Robert, mentioned how much he loved my cornbread, so I made it every week. Then Daniel's brother Marcus got a girlfriend named Priya, and Priya was a guest, so Priya sat at the table while I stood at the stove. That was how it was explained to me actually, not with cruelty, just with the calm certainty of a rule that had always existed. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was being generous. I told myself this was what you did when you loved someone's family. Before I tell you the rest, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from right now? And have you ever worked so hard to belong somewhere that you lost track of whether you actually wanted to be there? Because that was me for 4 years. 4 years of Sundays. 4 years of cornbread and pot roast and making sure the good china was washed by hand. 4 years of nodding when Diane talked about how Priya was adjusting so well to the family. How she seemed so relaxed. How lucky Marcus was. Priya was lovely, by the way. None of this is about her. She had no idea, I think, that there was a system. She just stepped into the space that had already been arranged for her. The space that had been arranged for her had been built for mine. The moment it clarified for me, really clarified, not just the slow ache I had been carrying, but the sharp, bright edge of it, was a Thursday evening in November. Daniel and I were in the kitchen after dinner. I had just finished the dishes. He was on his phone. I said, almost casually, that I was thinking about hiring a second architect for the firm. Things were picking up. I had just landed a municipal contract, the kind I had spent 3 years chasing. It was a real moment. I was proud. He looked up from his phone and said, "That's great, babe. Hey, can you text my mom and find out if she wants you to bring anything extra Sunday? Marcus is bringing some of his work friends." I stood there for a second. "Did you hear what I said?" I asked. "Yeah, the contract. That's awesome." He was already typing. I texted Diane. She wanted my lemon cake. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday, I was in the kitchen when I heard Diane in the dining room telling one of Marcus's friends about the firm. She described it as my little project. She said I kept myself busy with it. She said it was nice that I had something to do. I stood at the counter and kept slicing the cake. That night, I told Daniel what I had heard. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She doesn't mean it like that. You know how she is." I did know how she was. That was the problem. The Sunday dinner, 3 weeks after that, was when it all came apart. Marcus had announced a promotion at work and the family was celebrating. There was champagne. Diane had ordered flowers. Robert gave a toast. It was a genuine celebration and Marcus deserved it. Midway through dinner, I mentioned that my municipal contract had been covered in the city's design journal that week. Small mention. 2 sentences. I was almost apologizing for saying it. Diane smiled at me across the table and said, "That's nice, Clara." Then she turned back to Marcus. Robert said, "You know, it's really good that you have the flexibility with your schedule to keep up with the cooking and everything. Daniel's hours are so demanding, it just makes sense." I looked at Daniel. He was nodding slowly. I said, "I work 60 hours a week." Silence. Robert said gently, like explaining something to a child, "Right, but your schedule is more flexible. That's what we mean." Diane set down her glass and said, "Clara, this is just how our family works. The women manage the home. It keeps everything running. It's not a competition. Daniel works hard. Marcus works hard. You contribute in other ways. That's a beautiful thing." I looked at my husband. He looked at his plate. And I thought, there it is. That's what this has always been. I excused myself to get more water. I stood at the kitchen sink for a full minute, looking out the window at the backyard I had actually re-landscaped the previous spring. Pro bono, because I thought it would make them happy. The garden beds. The stone path. The lighting I had sourced and installed myself on a Saturday while Daniel watched football inside. I went back to the table. I finished dinner. I helped clear the plates. On the drive home, I said, "I need you to tell me honestly what you think." Daniel said, "I think my mom is old-fashioned." I said, "That's not what I asked." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I think it would mean a lot to them if you didn't make it a big thing." I didn't say anything else that night. I just needed to understand what I was actually dealing with. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something I should have done years earlier. I started paying attention with different eyes. I went back through our joint account and I looked at the last 4 years. I tallied what I had spent on groceries for Sunday dinners. Ingredients, supplies, the good cuts of meat because Diane had a preference. I looked at what I had spent on their household repairs. The small things Daniel always said he'd reimburse me for and never did. The plumber I called and paid when Robert was traveling and Diane had a leak. The catering supplies I bought when they hosted Marcus's birthday. The garden renovation. Over 4 years, I had spent just under $19,000 on their household. Not ours. Theirs. I wrote it all down in a spreadsheet. $19,412. Then I called my accountant, a woman named Beverly who had been my client before she became my accountant, and I asked her a quiet question. I said, if a person is contributing financially and in labor to another household with an understanding that it's a family arrangement, is there any legal structure to that? Beverly was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Send me what you have. I want to pause here and say something. A lot of people in situations like mine wait for a dramatic moment. A screaming match, a door slamming, a villain speech. I waited for it too, for a long time. What I got instead was a Tuesday afternoon phone call from Beverly. She had reviewed the records. She had a few more questions. She also, almost in passing, mentioned that she had been doing Daniel's personal taxes as part of our joint filing and she needed me to verify some account information. I said, "What account?" She said, "The secondary savings account, the one he opened in October 3 years ago." I had no idea what account she was talking about. I want you to think about what that feels like for a moment. Not the discovery itself, the moment just before it, when you realize the shape of something without yet knowing exactly what it is. That cold, hell-breath second. I asked Beverly to send me what she had. Daniel had been depositing money into a personal savings account, not our joint account, not any account I knew about for 3 years. Irregular amounts, some months a few hundred, some months a few hundred, some months over 1,000. The deposits lined up, in several cases, with transfers out of the business expense account I had set up for our household, which he had co-signing access to for practical reasons. Over 3 years, $72,000 had moved quietly into an account, with only his name on it. I didn't call him. I didn't confront him at home. I called my attorney, a woman I had worked with on a contract dispute 2 years earlier. Her name was Renata, and she did not waste words. She said, "Forward me everything. Don't move anything. Don't say anything. Come in Thursday." I went in Thursday. I want to tell you what Renata said, but first I want to tell you what I did the night before that appointment. I made a lemon cake. I don't know exactly why. Maybe because my hands needed something to do. Maybe because I had made that cake so many times that the motions of it were the only thing that felt solid. I made it, and then I stood in my kitchen at 11 at night looking at it, and I thought, I made this for people who looked at my 60-hour work week and called it flexibility. I made this every week for 4 years, and the word they had for me was helpful. I put plastic wrap over the cake, and I put it in the refrigerator, and I went to bed. Renata explained what we were looking at. The account withdrawals, depending on their origin and intent, could constitute financial misconduct within the marriage. She used specific legal language I won't recite here because I am not an attorney and this is not legal advice. What I will tell you is that she said the documentation I had was substantial. She said I had been thorough without knowing I was being thorough, which she said was more useful than people who went looking for trouble and moved too fast. She said, "What do you want the outcome to be?" I said I wanted to understand the full picture before I decided anything. She said that was the right answer. Over the next 3 weeks, I kept my life exactly the same on the surface. I went to Sunday dinners. I brought the food. I smiled at Diane and nodded at Robert and watched Marcus and Priya hold hands across the table, and I felt something very strange, which was a kind of peace. Not happiness, just clarity, the kind you get when you finally stop pretending you don't see something. One Sunday in January, about 5 weeks after the Thursday appointment, I arrived at the family house with my lemon cake. I sat down at the table. I let the dinner proceed. Diane mentioned that it would be nice to have everyone over more often now that spring was coming. Robert mentioned that the back porch needed restaining and looked at me in a way that was not quite asking, but was not quite not asking. I said, "I'm not going to be able to help with that." Diane looked at me. I said, "I'm not going to be able to help with Sunday dinners anymore either, or much of anything else actually." The table was quiet. Daniel said, "Clara." I looked at him and I said very calmly, "I met with an attorney. I have the account information. I have the transfer records." Beverly helped me document everything going back 4 years, including the household contributions. I looked at Robert and Diane. $19,000 over 4 years. In labor, materials, and direct expenses. I have receipts. I looked back at Daniel. $72,000 in 3 years. I have those records too. Nobody moved. Diane said, This is a family matter, Clara. You don't bring lawyers into family." I said, "I understand that's how your family works." I picked up my bag. I looked at Priya for a moment. She was staring at the table. I said quietly, just to her, "You're really talented. You should keep doing your work." Then I walked out. I won't tell you the divorce was easy. It wasn't. I won't tell you Daniel didn't call, or that his parents didn't write letters, or that his brother didn't leave me a voicemail saying I had humiliated his family. I won't tell you there wasn't a stretch of about 6 weeks where I ate cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row and didn't speak to anyone except my attorney and my accountant, and, once, my mother, who said, "I always thought you did too much over there," which made me laugh for the first time in a while. What I will tell you is that Renata was excellent at her job. The financial documentation led to a settlement that was fair. More than fair, actually. The $72,000 was addressed. The marital asset division was handled thoroughly. I kept the firm. I kept the municipal contract. I kept the client list I had built over 5 years of 60-hour weeks. I moved into an apartment on the east side of Charlotte with big windows and no room for a Sunday dinner table, which felt intentional. I bought 2 plants. I almost killed one of them and then nursed it back, which felt like an appropriate metaphor for the season I was in. My firm landed 2 more contracts that spring. I hired the second architect I had mentioned to Daniel in the kitchen that Thursday night, the night he was thinking about what to text his mother. Her name is Justine, and she is sharp and direct and does not apologize for taking up space. On her first week, she came into the office with good coffee for both of us and asked me what the firm's North Star was. I thought about it for a second. Then I said, "We make things that last." She nodded. "Good. That's a North Star." I think about that night at the dinner table sometimes. Not with anger anymore. Anger is expensive, and I've stopped spending on things that don't return anything. I think about it the way you think about a door you walk through, with a kind of neutrality, maybe even gratitude for the clarity it gave you. The Sunday dinners went away. So did the cornbread, the lemon cake, the dish towel, the stone garden path I built for people who called my career a little project, and my labor flexibility. What stayed was this: the contract, the firm, the second architect, the window light in the new apartment. The plant I didn't let die. The morning after everything was finalized, I woke up early. I made coffee and I sat by the window, and I didn't make anything for anyone. I just sat there in the quiet and drank my coffee while it was still hot. I hadn't done that in 4 years. It turns out that's what freedom feels like. Not loud, not triumphant, just warm and yours and uninterrupted. If you're somewhere tonight where you feel like your work is invisible, where your contributions are called something softer and smaller than what they actually are, I want you to know that the accounting is never wrong. Someone may not be counting what you bring to the table, but you can count it. You can document every receipt, every Sunday, every hour, and when you have the full picture, you can decide exactly what to do with it. I'm not here to tell you to leave. I'm here to tell you that clarity is always an option. And once you have it, it belongs to you. They can call it flexibility. They can call it helpful. They can call it just how our family works. You know what it is. You've always known.